De quem é e de que instituição é que vem. Depois disso, vamos ouvir algo sobre o que é o AERC e sobre o engajamento da Faculdade de Agronomia, nomeadamente o Departamento de Economia Agrária, junto deste consórcio africano para a pesquisa econômica. Então, vou começar eu por me apresentar. O meu nome é Bruno Araújo, sou docente da Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal da UEM, Departamento de Economia Agrária, Departamento de Economia e Desenvolvimento Agrário. E muito obrigado. Então, vou pedir que a apresentação siga esta ordem, tanto primeiro esta fila, depois esta, depois segue-se aquela, e por fim, então, vamos pedir à mesa que se apresente. Muito obrigado.
Bom dia, eu chamo-me Calado Muyanga, venho representar o Ministério da Ciência, Tecnologia e Ensino Superior.
Bom dia, chamo-me Kevin Paulino Sozinho, sou estudante finalista de curso de Engenharia Florestal na Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal.
Bom dia, meu nome é Wilmer Hermínio Mbeve, sou estudante de Engenharia Florestal na Faculdade de Agronomia da UEM.
Bom dia, sou Inocência Macoacua, sou estudante da Faculdade de Agronomia, finalista em Engenharia Agronômica.
Bom dia a todos, meu nome é Noah Beca, sou estudante de curso de Agroeconomia e Extensão Agrária e sou representante dos estudantes da Faculdade de Agronomia.
Bom dia, chamo-me Adnissa Almirante, sou estudante da Faculdade de Agronomia, curso Agroeconomia e Extensão Agrária.
Bom dia, eu sou a Elga Chemane, venho da Universidade Pedagógica de Maputo, represento a Associação dos Estudantes como coordenadora geral e estudante finalista de Sociologia.
Muito bom dia, meu nome é Ana Maria Vias, estou a representar a Secretaria de Estado da Juventude e Emprego. Obrigada.
Bom dia, meu nome é Francisco Mabunda, represento o Instituto para a Promoção de Pequenas e Médias Empresas.
Bom dia, meu nome é Felita Júlio, sou da Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal, docente no Departamento de Economia e Desenvolvimento Agrário.
Bom dia, eu sou a Gervásia Moss, sou docente na Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal, Departamento de Economia e Desenvolvimento Agrário.
Bom dia, meu nome é Milker Aguiar, sou do Banco BCI, Era de Martin.
Bom dia, eu sou Efigênia Alfinete, do BCI, gestora de produtos e serviços.
Bom dia, sou Sarmento Malai, sou funcionário do Instituto Nacional da Juventude, nos Serviços Centrais de Programas da Juventude. Obrigado.
Bom dia, eu sou Anand Salam Mafuca, estudante de Agroeconomia e Extensão Agrária na Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal e da UEM.
Bom dia, Ornília Matuca, estudante finalista do curso de Agroeconomia e Extensão Agrária na Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal.
Bom dia, me chamo Nilza Jeite, estudante da Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal, curso de Agroeconomia e Extensão Agrária.
Bom dia, Gilion Paulino, estudante da Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal, em Agroeconomia e Extensão Agrária.
Bom dia, meu nome é Adelaide Ganhane, venho representar a World Vision. Obrigada.
Bom dia, meu nome é Sandra Bila, estou em representação a representar o Banco de Moçambique, concretamente o Gabinete de Inclusão Financeira. Obrigada.
Bom dia a todos. Meu nome é Leta de Castro, a representação do Banco de Moçambique, Gabinete de Inclusão Financeira.
Bom dia. Meu nome é Márcia Zaqueu, sou estudante do curso de Engenharia Florestal na Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal.
Bom dia, chamo-me Tsefora Bambo, sou finalista de Engenharia Florestal na Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal.
Bom dia a todos. Eu sou Helder Zaval, da Universidade Eduardo Mondlane, Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal. E como foi dito aqui, representante da faculdade no AERC. Obrigado.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Luanga Elizabeth Nziri. I am a senior lecturer of development finance from the University of Stellenbosch in Cape Town, South Africa. And I'm also a researcher at the AERC in Nairobi, Kenya.
Good morning. My name is Mark Korir. I'm a manager at the training department of the African Economic Research Consortium. We are based in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm happy to be in Mozambique, my first time. So it is great. We will do and discuss a lot of things today. Thank you.
Temos mais participante que acaba de chegar. Vou pedir que muito rapidamente se apresente.
Sim, bom dia. Meu nome é Inácio Muzemi, sou do Ministério dos Negócios Estrangeiros e Cooperação. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado a todos. A qualquer momento podemos receber mais convidados. As cadeiras vazias poderão ser preenchidos por outros convidados que vão chegando. E, mais uma vez, queria desejar boas-vindas a todos, em nome da Faculdade de Agronomia e Engenharia Florestal da Universidade Eduardo Mondlane, e agradecer também o fato de se terem disponibilizado a gastar algum do vosso tempo para estarem conosco, a fim de ouvirmos esta apresentação, portanto, os resultados desta investigação que foi feita em 10 países, incluindo Moçambique. E auguro também que tenhamos um seminário muito participativo, muito produtivo. As vossas contribuições serão muito bem-vindas e poderão ajudar a melhorar o documento final que vai ser redigido pela investigadora, a professora Nanziri, que vai fazer a sua apresentação em devido tempo. Em princípio, a nossa agenda, tínhamos previsto que fosse como está ali projetado, mas como vocês devem ter reparado, estamos um pouco atrasados, fizemos este compasso de tempo à espera que viessem mais participantes, mas seja como for, nós vamos ter a apresentação do Dr. Marco Correia, que vai nos dar um pequeno informe sobre as atividades do AERC. Depois disso, vamos ter um breve historial do Departamento de Economia, ou propriamente da Faculdade de Agronomia, junto do AERC, como membro do AERC. Após isso, vamos ter um intervalo de lanche, e o lanche vai ser servido mesmo neste corredor ali no fundo, precedido pela foto de família, que nós temos que documentar aos nossos parceiros que estivemos reunidos, e não há melhor documento senão a imagem. Depois disso, voltamos para a quinta para termos a apresentação do documento, que se irá seguir, ao qual se irá seguir a sua discussão. Tanto teremos a oportunidade de apresentar as nossas dúvidas, as nossas contribuições para a melhoria, e, no fim, vamos ter um sumário, as considerações finais, e às 12 esperamos poder nos servir do almoço para recuperar as forças que tivermos despendido neste esforço. E depois disso, então, vamos para as nossas origens, para as nossas precedências. Portanto, se concordarem comigo, esta vai ser a nossa agenda de hoje. Podemos fazer assim? Muito obrigado. Então, sem mais delongas, vou convidar o professor Mark Corir para nos dar um breve historial do AERC.
Bon dia. Am I not pronouncing it well? Bon dia. Okay, good morning. So as you have known, my name is Mark Korir, and I already introduced myself by saying that I am one of the managers in the African Economic Research Consortium, and I coordinate a program called the Collaborative Masters Program in Agricultural and Applied Economics. We have actually collaborated a great deal with the University of Eduardo Mondlane, and since 2015, when I came to AERC, we have done quite a bit in relation to research and faculty development in the university. Of course, we desire to do more, and this is one of the things that we are collaborating today to present the results of research on financial inclusion. So I have a few slides which I'll share with you, and we can begin with slide number 2, which shows our framework, how the AERC engages with the stakeholders. So basically, we have 3 arms of one of research, another one of training, and another one of policy outreach. That is what we call our capacity building framework. So when AERC began in 1988, it began as a research organization. But shortly after it began, it realized that it did not have enough capacity to do research. So what we did was to develop the training component so that we would train masters and PhDs who would then do research. So we have the African mandate, and you can understand, in 1988, we didn't have much PhDs. We didn't have a lot of master's people. And so we began with a collaborative master's program in economics, then later on the PhD program in economics. So once we have these trained, the masters and PhDs, then they can do research. Then once they do research, we can now disseminate. Today we are in that red portion, which we call policy outreach and dissemination. We don't do things alone. We do research and training with institutions because AERC is just a lean secretariat, very thin. So we depend on universities, on research institutions, on individuals to do research and training. So in the next slide, we just have a narrative of what we do. Say we are a premier institution. I think we are trying to be the best in Africa and even in the world. We keep doing our best. And therefore we say we are a premier organization in Africa. We have sub-Saharan African mandate, and we basically dwell on economics research. We have graduate training. We have graduate training. We have a CPP. We have a thematic research. We have collaborative research. Maybe I can just spend a minute to differentiate the two. Thematic research is for those who are entering into research. They are junior in terms of research, and therefore we would, take them through a mentorship program. So normally we want them to do a proposal, then we call them into what we call biannual research workshops, and then they present their ideas to panelists who are sourced internationally from all over the world. They come, listen to the work, and then they guide the researcher. Then they go back to their stations and do the research, do what we call work in progress. Then we invite them again to present and interact with the resource persons. Then finally they produce the final report, which we publish and ask even that we publish in peer-reviewed, international reviewed journals. For collaborative, it is much more senior. Here we don't mentor. What we do is just call for proposals, then senior people in the field, those who have done a lot of research in this area, do the research, and then they present their work in senior policy seminars so that they can feed into the policy making process. So communication is basically about publications and doing national workshops like this, and also doing some senior policy seminars. So over the decades, we have managed to mentor about, say, 4,000 economists. That is 4,200. And these have come from 35 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. For your information, we are not in Northern Africa, but once in a while we do get researchers from Egypt, Morocco, and related countries. So those are up there. We have managed to get 3,800 master's graduates and 400 PhD graduates in this field. So the journey continues. They look so many, but when you consider our countries, there are very many. These are still a drop in the ocean. You may find even in Kenya, where we have had a program to do a master's and PhDs, they are still not enough. The universities are expanding every day. We need them to teach. We need them to go into research organizations. So the capacity building agenda continues. In the next slide, let's go down. We say that inclusive finance project was supported by the AERC, International Development Research Center, and it's about access and usage of basic financial services, which we are saying it is still quite low in our countries. So it is low, but we think with the intervention, when we engage and improve on this, we want to believe that financial inclusion will go a long way in reducing poverty, and improving the well-being of our nationals. So financial technology, we say, is an important area, financial sector development, and it bears a lot of promise to our countries. When we look at some countries like Kenya, where I come from, we have this M-Pesa technology, which we are really so proud of, which has gotten into almost everyone in the village. And when this happens, when, you know, you have children sending money to their grandmothers, to their fathers, to their parents, way back in the rural, they kind of enable them to do something in the village. They will feel they get included and they can make certain decisions and make purchases and do that. So financial technology, we say, is important in our countries, which will go a long way in curtailing the underdevelopment that we continue to have. Let's go to the next slide. So we would like to understand the financial sector development and inclusion in Africa. As I told you, we have the Africa mandate. The number of countries to be covered are so many. In this study, we covered a few. Our presenter will tell you how many, and will give you the findings of this research. So apart from understanding this concept of financial sector development, we would want to have inclusive growth, which will go a long way in realizing the 2030 agenda for sustainable development goals. So these are some of the goals of the project, the financial inclusion project that we are talking about. Let's go to the next slide. So once we have done this, after understanding financial inclusion, we would like to inform policy. You know, research in itself does not play any useful purpose. We have to feed into policy making. For example, if, for example, a country does not have a policy on digital finance, on digital payments, on how to control, you know, Bitcoins and so on, then it is difficult to support and regulate. So the important thing is to do research, understand the subject, then provide policy propositions, how things should be done, how the sector should be supported, how it should be regulated so that it grows and helps citizens. So this informing policy for inclusive growth is an important agenda. Apart from this, we want to strengthen cooperation and networking among policy stakeholders. For example, in this room, I have heard about 7 or so institutions that are in here. We have the university, we have banks, we have a financial sector people, Ministry of Employment, and so on. This will strengthen our collaboration. Let this not be the end. You will find that some of you have never met before, but you will meet today. Please continue with the agenda. Continue discussing and saying, we got some information on this. How can we better improve on employment of our youth? How can we help them, you know, get into the business of businesses in the financial sector? How can we include them in the economy and so on? So these are some of the expectations of the project to increase networking amongst policy makers and stakeholders. Apart from that, we also would like to look at areas of further research. Research in itself does not end there. Normally, you will see at the end of the day, there'll be a recommendation, almost the last one, recommendation for further research. I'm sure you have seen a lot of that. So we'll expect that even after we have presented, room for further research, because this research cannot address everything. There will be areas that will not have covered, and therefore we will get other areas that we can research on. As I finish, let's go. We desire to have other forums, like a regional policy forum. Let me state that we normally have about 4 types of forums in AERC. The first one is a senior policy seminar, which normally invites the most senior policymakers in a country to discuss on the outcomes of research from AERC. Once we discuss, we normally develop what we call a communique to decide and say, this is what we have had. We want to commit to do something in relation to this, to develop policy, to promote and move it further. So they do communiques and they commit to do that. We have regional policy forums, which are not Africa-wide, like the senior policy seminars. They're just for regions. We can have for Southern Africa region, Eastern Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, just bringing 10, 15, 20 countries, not the whole 38, 40, 50 countries we normally have the mandate. So if a certain research is relevant for the region, we also convene these regional policy forums. So these are some of the things for me to do. Then at the end of the day, we have others. We even have thesis dissemination workshops for just research output from thesis of students, master's students. We also have national policy workshops like this one. So there are a number of policy outreach activities that we do have. Finally, we normally want to publish, because when we publish, we not only promote our collaborators, particularly the professors in the universities, but we also ensure we have wider readership, from all over the world when we do publications in peer-reviewed journals. We also do have an AERC working paper series. So when the research is completed, we can do that locally within AERC. And they are quite decent publications in themselves that receive readership because we put it out there into the web and many stakeholders can get access. Let me finish by saying that, let's go to the last slide. And we say that with these few remarks, I wish you a fruitful engagement. Let us engage so that at the end of the day, we see value in coming here, so that it is not just spending the time just like that. It should be spent to a very useful purpose. Here, do you say obrigado? So yours is not here. I will add that one now. You are very few in Africa. Mozambique, Angola, and Guinea-Bissau. Oh, so you are many. Now, so what we will do moving forward, we will try to include Mozambique and other Lusophone countries in the research and training agenda of AERC. We have done that before, but we will increase. Zavela will tell you, Bruno Arroyo will tell you, we'll keep trying, but we will even try more so that we get more inclusion in the AERC. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Muito obrigado, Dr. Marca, por em tão poucas palavras e de forma tão resumida, mas tão holística, nos ter apresentado o que é o AERC, o que é o Consórcio Africano para a Pesquisa Econômica, e nos ter posto ao corrente das principais áreas de intervenção deste consórcio. E, mais uma vez, uma salva de palmas para si. E agora convido o Dr. Elder Zavale para nos falar, dar-nos um breve historial do engajamento da Faculdade de Agronomia neste consórcio africano para a pesquisa econômica. Dr. Zavale, por favor.
Mais uma vez, bom dia a todos. Eu serei mesmo muito breve, mas a minha principal missão aqui é mesmo de encorajar a todos vocês para sermos mais ativos nessa colaboração com a AERC, porque existem, de facto, muitas oportunidades, como o colega que antecedeu disse, mas que não têm sido exploradas não só por Moçambique, mas também por outros países falantes da língua portuguesa. Em termos de colaboração entre a Universidade Eduardo Mondlane e o AERC, começou há mais de 10 anos. Acho que uma boa parte dos presentes aqui recordam do saudoso professor Fermino. Ele, de facto, é que foi o nosso primeiro representante no AERC. E desde essa longa interação já tivemos várias atividades que ocorreram na universidade, a enumerar atividades de treinamento ao nível de mestrado. Nós já treinamos vários estudantes de vários países africanos que vieram à faculdade, foram treinados e depois puderam ingressar em outros programas. E nós estamos muito felizes e gostaríamos que isto continuasse. Nunca tivemos estudantes moçambicanos a participar em programas semelhantes em outras universidades, que, mais uma vez, essa é uma oportunidade que devemos explorar. De facto, vejo aqui muitos estudantes, prestem atenção a essa janela, é uma janela de oportunidade que tem sido muito pouco explorada. Para além de treinamento de vários estudantes, tanto a nível do mestrado, assim como para preparação para o nível de mestrado, e esses estudantes ingressaram depois em programas de mestrado e programas de doutoramento. Temos alguns estudantes que estão mesmo a terminar programas de doutoramento, que começaram das nossas mãos, e nós sentimos-nos muito felizes por isso. Já tivemos também colaboração de nossos docentes a irem a outras universidades para lecionarem várias disciplinas no âmbito da colaboração com a AERC. Os nossos programas de mestrado também foram desenhados tendo em vista o programa regional, de mestrado regional, no âmbito do AERC. Então, os nossos programas também são comparáveis a programas de outras universidades africanas, que é muito bom. Tirando a parte do treinamento, de estudantes, também já tivemos colaboração em termos de pesquisa, como aqui já foi mencionado. Nós já tivemos participação em várias pesquisas e estão também em processos de publicação vários estudos desenvolvidos por investigadores da nossa faculdade, mas seria bom também que tivéssemos colaboração de investigadores de outras instituições nessas iniciativas de investigação, porque de facto são muito boas iniciativas. E uma das iniciativas, das várias, essa que será apresentada hoje. Para além disso, entrando na parte de docência e na parte de capacitação institucional, nós já beneficiamos de vários fundos de capacitação institucional para a nossa faculdade, no âmbito da aquisição de vários equipamentos, mesmo softwares e por ali fora. Então, estamos bastante agradecidos e gostaríamos de expressar o nosso agradecimento ao AERC e gostaríamos de continuar com esta colaboração. Estas são as principais áreas que nós já tivemos colaboração com a AERC e gostaríamos de continuar nessa colaboração. E gostaria mesmo de ver aqui muitos estudantes. Procurem essa janela que está ali, está aberta e que não tem sido explorada por moçambicanos. Talvez a língua seja barreira, mas hoje em dia eu acho que não temos como evitar o inglês. Temos que nos enfrentar no inglês. Então, vamos explorar essa oportunidade. Acredito, não tenho participado, não participei na seleção, mas tenho certeza que se estudantes moçambicanos aparecerem lá, o AERC estará bastante feliz e vai fazer esforço para ter esses estudantes nos programas dele. Eu tenho quase certeza, porque não está a haver participação de estudantes moçambicanos. Assim como das oportunidades de investigação que existem, também temos pessoas de outras instituições a colaborarem nos programas dele. Eles têm uma página, talvez divulgar a página deles, pôr a página deles, para poder se explorar as várias oportunidades que existem lá. Mas se procurarem no Google AERC, vai aparecer. African Economic Research Consortium. Vai encontrar. Vai ser logo a primeira, será das primeiras coisas que vai aparecer. Não vou me alongar e passo a palavra de volta para o moderador e muito obrigado e desejo um bom seminário para todos. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado, Dr. Zavala, por, em poucas palavras, nos ter dado uma vista panorâmica do engajamento da faculdade com este consórcio africano. E o apelo que fez foi ouvido por todos os presentes. Gostaria que os nossos estudantes acatassem este apelo. Também está a direção do AERC, representada pelo Dr. Mark, que sabe que esta preocupação da nossa parte, nós não queremos ser uma ilha, queremos nos engajar com os outros países africanos, queremos mostrar que estamos ao mesmo nível, nós estamos abaixo deles. Então, cabe a vocês aderirem a este apelo que foi feito e creio que o AERC vai receber de bom grado. E mais uma vez, muito obrigado, Dr. Zavala. Uma salva de palmas. Então, dito isto, iria convidar a todos para irmos fazer a foto de família e depois tomarmos o nosso café para nos predispormos para ouvirmos o resultado da pesquisa feita e contribuirmos também com as nossas intervenções para a melhoria dos resultados. E muito obrigado. O café vai ser servido aqui no corredor, no fundo, e é onde vamos fazer também a foto de família. Muito obrigado a todos. Temos 20 minutos para isso. Então, vamos apresentação. E, sem querer roubar mais tempo, vou convidar a doutora Nanziri para vir fazer a apresentação. E quero aproveitar este momento para informar que, antes do almoço, vamos tirar mais uma foto de família num espaço mais atraente do que este onde estivemos, que é fora da sala, onde tem um jardim verde. E, doutora Nanzira, por favor.
Obrigado, professor. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, much better. I will try to learn Portuguese. I hope you can also learn more English. Yeah, obrigado. My name is, yes, Dr. Nanziri. Elizabeth is better. You can call me Elizabeth. So I will present to you the work that we have done with in a team of 3 and 2 other co-authors, Dr. Martin, Mwale, Tony. They are not here. This is a study on 2 countries, DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, they speak French, and Mozambique, here, and you speak English. And it is one of 11 studies. So they were 11 case studies conducted by AERC and the IDRC, the Institute for Development, that IDRC is based in Canada. So we are looking specifically at how to improve the welfare of people in fragile states. So our main focus in this case study, we are only looking at countries in fragile states or fragile condition. What is fragile? What is fragility? We are looking at countries that have experienced war. We are all familiar with that word. When I was coming last night, we find the road is blocked and they see manifesto, something like this, yes. So we have to take another route. So we are all familiar that there is not so much peace in some of the countries in Africa. So countries like that are many on the continent, and the United Nations and the AU, especially African Union, they're talking about a gun-free Africa, yeah? Because we know the disaster that follows violence. So fragility from wars, civil strife, because when we are not happy, we start going on the street and we're throwing stones. You saw what happened in Sri Lanka. Yeah, when people are not happy, we see all of these things. So that is fragility. Another type of fragility, disasters from the weather. Yeah. So in Africa, again, there are countries that have suffered like that. And we'll see the difference between DRC, Congo, and Mozambique, the type of disaster they have. The type of disaster in Mozambique that is weather related is like in Somalia. Some have the droughts, too much heat, and others will have so much rain. You have floods and people will be displaced. So we were only looking at such countries that have experienced these troubles, and how we can help policymakers to help their citizens to live a better life. Yeah. There are people that were born when there is war, and they are going to school when there is war. So this continues, but we have to start thinking about how to help our people. So that is what these studies are all about. Okay, so we focused on women. All the 11 case studies, they were focusing on women, and you all call it children. Why do we focus on the women? I am very happy that there are many women here. Yeah, please, we clap for the organizers. After doing this, you will also see I am sad because my results, or our results, are not yet encouraging when it comes to Mozambique. When it comes to Congo, we were seeing good results, but in Mozambique, not yet good results. And I am happy that we have a good diversity of representatives here who will help us to understand why women in Mozambique are not empowered. I would have loved to see more men, because we want to ask you, men, what are you doing wrong? Yes, we need to know. We need to start working together, because we have seen that you alone, you cannot help us. We need to work together. So the men that are here will represent other men and pass on the message. Why did we focus on the youth? Because even without the war, even if you look at developed countries, women are always behind. I don't know why. Huh? Because God created man first and then woman, meaning we have to keep behind? I don't think so. We should be partners. Even in normal circumstances, women are marginalized. The children are tortured. When there is war, when there is fragility, it is worse. If there is disaster, in the war, they take our men to fight. Then we are left behind with the children, and we have to look for food. We have to take care of their education and their health. Yeah, but you will realize that we are not educated. We are not allowed to take education. How will we then think properly if we don't have the skill? So in fragility, it is worse. We are left without men or husbands or even brothers or fathers. So children and women suffer double during fragility. That is why we focused on them and see how we can improve their lives. Yeah. The students, I am very happy, there are many. Those of you in development economics or development studies, you know that when you educate a woman, you educate a nation, at least. Yeah? In some cases, they say a woman's education is beneficial to the nation, especially at lower levels than a man's education. So it makes a lot of sense for us to worry about women. So in fragility, we find a lot of sexual abuse, yeah, what we call sexual violence, and poor access to medical care. Yeah, several studies, you can agree with me on Mozambique, and even the data that I have here shows that Mozambique, you have a lot of polygamous marriages. Yeah, I don't know whether because there are many women than men, or is it just normal practice? But it is not good for development. From the results that I have, I would like to emphasize that everything I say, I am a researcher, I get data, I look at the data, and it tells me something, and that is what I'm saying. But why am I talking to you today? So that you can help us to understand what the results mean. Yeah, because you're here, this is your context, you know it better, you can explain to us better. So in disruption or in civil, in conflict states, we see a lot of disruption in education. I found in DRC where we were the other week, there are some provinces and districts that don't have schools anymore. So even if we say school is good, there are no structures for education. So there's a lot of education disruption. And when there is disruption in education, there will be low job opportunities. Who will employ you if you don't have skills? Even a university graduate, they'll say, where is the experience? We know this. So we find that after civil strife and disruptions, our children become brides at a very early age. I don't know, my blood runs cold, how an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old can become a wife. Of who? Men, that's your child. Yeah, you should always think about it that way. That's your child. You're impregnating your child at 8 years. Girls are becoming child brides, The boys become soldiers. This little kid who cannot carry a jerrycan of water is now carrying a gun. In countries where they take you for military training, you experience the power of a gun. When you shoot, it has that back force. Now imagine your child. I know you want to make them strong, but you beat your child and it falls down. Yeah. But imagine that child is shooting a gun. What are we creating on this continent? So now you know why I worry about women, children, and the youth as a researcher. So we also have rising poverty and inequality. I think this is the story that since you were born, you hear poverty and inequality. Rising and rising, but why? These are the issues that force us to look at more research in terms of what is the cause, what is the effect. Because our parents will say poverty of a long time ago is not poverty of today. They will tell you a different story. Your grandparent will say something. So we constantly trying to see what are the causes and effects of poverty. Now, in these studies, we want to see the extent to which or how financial inclusion can help us to reduce the effect of fragility on households. So there may be many solutions, many policies that policymakers can look at. In this case, we are saying to what extent can financial inclusion help us to reduce or to improve welfare for the groups of people that are marginalized, women and children. Then we will focus on only 2 fragile states in this study, which is DRC and Mozambique, as I said earlier. I'll try to give you results for Mozambique. Where necessary, I will make little inference to DRC. So what is the status of women and youth in Mozambique? You probably know better, but on a global scale, this is what we see. There are civil wars in the country. There are also weather-related disasters, like floods. In over the past 2 decades, we have seen 800,000 families or people being displaced. That looks like villages being wiped away, moved into internally maybe displaced camps of some sort. Labor force participation is not so high as per 2019. Yes, men seem to be engaged in what type of activity that I can ask you to also tell me. Women only up to 52%. Gender inequality. This is a study where we're looking at women. there is something called the Gender Inequality Index. Yeah. This index was constructed by, say, the United Nations or from the, what would it be? Forgive me for that. World Bank and these institutions, they often look at how equal men are to women in a country. We look at things like women participation in, say, politics. How many women ministers do you have in this country? You can write that down and somebody can tell me later. How many women parliamentarians do we have? How many women do we have in CEO position in the private sector? So we're looking at women in influential position. I don't mean having a woman because of affirmative action. Yeah, because you can do that, put that woman there, but she never says anything. When she's in a room, all she does is to bring you coffee and tea and serve them in, but she's on the same salary scale as you. Maybe they say, oh, we have the vice president is Madam so-and-so. But when there's a meeting, Madam so-and-so around. That is not what we are talking about. Decision-making, discussion, does she have a voice to speak when we are seated like this? So there are lots of indicators that are used to get to this index. Yeah? Now, based on that index, Mozambique by 2018, yeah, based on the Human Development Report, your score was about that much, 0.05. And there were about 162 countries. Yeah. Now, if you're number one, you are gender equal. Your men are almost equal. As we come down, if you're in position 162, there is the high inequality. So you can see where Mozambique was by 20, almost towards the bottom. Yeah? So very high gender inequality in the country. Youth unemployment was high, was still high. By 2015, according to USAID, you had 30% youth unemployment. Now let's think of COVID. What's that figure like? I apologize for not updating it. And maybe while I'm at that, I would also like to say that getting data is difficult. We struggle to access data for this country. Sent many requests, but we couldn't get data easily. So please, professors here, representatives from universities, please do tell us where we can get data, how we can make good contribution to your policy. You also have high female school dropouts. You can see 94% primary school enrollment. Yeah. But when we get to secondary school, we're only seeing about 11%. And the higher a child goes, the less likely they are to drop out. So in primary school, you are likely to see a lot of school dropouts. Yeah? You're likely to see a lot of school dropouts in primary school. But when a person goes high up, they are less likely to drop out. And you will notice that even where we have universal primary education, it only caters for tuition. It does not cater for things like uniform, because some schools like to have uniforms. They need food. A child needs to go to school when they have eaten if there is no feeding scheme in the school, because otherwise they have to take little lunch box. A household that is poor cannot afford to give their children their lunch box. Yeah. So universal primary education alone is not sufficient to have education graduation. You see what I mean? So because there was this policy to have universal primary education in many countries in Africa, we saw a lot of enrollment, but the completion rate was very low, especially in primary school. So that high dropout affects women more. When a family has two types of children, boys and girls, and they have little money, they will keep the girl child at home. She will now start taking care of everybody in the house, contributing and helping the mother while the boy goes to school. That is where I was asking you. You're marrying off a child of 8 years because by the time they finish primary school, there may be 12 years. A 12-year-old pregnant with no education is just going to become a thumping stone, a ground being beaten every now and then by the so-called husband because he's still immature, a baby. Well, to mothers like me, even when you're 30, you're a baby. Yeah. Men, you go to your mothers crying, you're still babies, yet you can make other people's babies. Child brides, 50% of Mozambican girls serve as child brides. I really am grateful that we have a few of you that are here. Whether you have taken it as afterlife education, at least you have managed to go back to school. Thank you to the students that you have attended here and the rest of the students that are still going to school, you know, some of whom might have been child brides, but later on pick up education. But that is the scenario for Mozambique. So I wanted to paint that picture for you of the status of women and youth and see how we can improve that. If we go to financial inclusion in this country, because that is what I want to talk about, what has happened in this country. You can see Mozambique, where you are on my on the right-hand side. There are those bars. Mozambique is properly circled. Look at where you are, at least by 2014. How many people were in the formal banking sector? I had somebody from the bank. You can tell us why the country doesn't have a lot of inclusion at 60% by 2015, I must add, but I'll tell you what the figures look like by 2019, because I managed to get the FinScope 2019 data. On the left-hand side, we just show you the progress of the country, because there's been efforts in financial inclusion, and that's why we were saying, okay, let us see how it has affected the welfare of the country. What are some of the inclusion strategies? We have on the map up until 2014, but later, this is what happened. In 2016 or thereabout, 2016 to 2022, you have the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, which is focusing on agency banking. So I had somebody from the financial sector, again, talking about, what was it? Forgotten, but close to digital financing. So agency banking means that we have more agents going out. Yeah, we're no longer waiting. Banks are no longer staying in their brick and mortar type of buildings, but they can now go out. They have more agents, they can use stores, storekeepers, agricultural supply units as agents. So there was a lot of focus on that and digitization. There was also micro insurance, and I would like, you can see in brackets, I'm asking why micro insurance. Please, this is a question that I'm posing to you. You can help me answer that. Like I said, I am a researcher, I find these, and I asked myself a question, why that particular product? Was it a policy in the country? Why do we see a lot of the focus on micro insurance? Between 2014 and 2019, we see a decline because of this innovation put in place. From the 60% that I mentioned, if you remember this graph here, the red is exclusion, yes? So, and the graph here is stopping on 2014. Now, by 2019, we're seeing exclusion declining from 60% to 46%, mainly because of mobile money. Now, there's an issue with mobile money. Again, financial inclusion or financial sector representatives, please do tell us why we see this. There are more women in areas that have mobile money network, what we call penetration, mobile penetration. But there are fewer women that have mobile money accounts. Why is that the case? That's again another question that I'm posing to you. There is something about women empowerment, and this goes or starts from the household. How much power, ladies that are here, does a woman in Mozambique have in her house, decision making? In DRC, we saw something well, interesting. We give women credit, but we do not see results from the credit that we give them. And the men, when we had the policy workshop like this, told us that women prefer to look after their homes, like their parents. So that is why you don't see them buying assets in the house. But there's another thinking that they probably don't have power. They allow them to go into the finance institutions, but when the money comes, the man has control over that money. And we all know what men love. What do they love? Electronic toys. Yeah, they like electronics. Even a poor man, the moment he gets money, he wants to have the most expensive cell phone. He wants to have a radio. You know, they like these gadgets, not things like a bed in the house or a sewing machine, which can be used to make more money, or even a bicycle. You will say, no, I'll wait until I get a car. Before I get the car, I might as well buy me a cell phone and a radio so I can listen to news or music, I don't know. So I ask you the same. Why is it that we don't see many women in Mozambique with mobile money accounts? Yet, there are many women in areas that have mobile penetration. Please, that's a question I'm requesting for an answer from you. So until 2017, from the regulatory side, the law did not prohibit discrimination against access to credit for women. Women, however, until 2005, who was born by then? 2005, yeah? Women could not sign contracts, not even register a business as men could do. So you can imagine if your mother was around about that time, and she was totally helpless. She could not sign any credit contract, anything, nothing. We even register a business, meaning they'll be in informal businesses. And the law didn't do anything. Now, all that has been happening, but the government is saying nothing. But I'm asking, if you have information that is contrary to what I see, please do tell us. Because that is not my own words, but from data that is actually collected from your very own government. We look into the legal and regulatory environment, and these are the results that they find. So we have supply side constraints. If we have, no, we also have demand constraints that are coming from within the households, and then we will have the regulatory constraints. If we are not protected, if we do not protect our people, the perpetrators will not stop. So that is another picture I wanted to share with you. So being a researcher, for the policymakers in here, please allow me to speak to the academicians by now getting into literature. So with literature, we know that state of fragility impacts welfare a lot. Yeah. So we know that armed conflict and gender-based violence, are prevalent in those scenarios. We know that maternal and child health care are compromised when we have conflict. However, we don't often talk about what solutions there are to all of these issues. A man who is not liquid, who doesn't have a heavy pocket, is a very dangerous one. Usually men will fight because they are poor, because with money they feel powerful. We talk to men sometimes and they're like, no, my love is through money. So if you find a woman who's got enough money, then you feel threatened, like, what can I give this? So you back off. Now, when the man doesn't have money, he becomes violent. Yeah. When there's war, I honestly feel sad. The one war that is in front of all of us, on radios, televisions, is the Russia-Ukrainian war. Not that we don't see war in our own countries, but okay, let's look at that one. The first thing you hear in any of these wars is rape. What goes into these soldiers? That's the first thing, some form of punishment. Let me punish this person, mother or child, or like you see a beast. I'm sorry to use the word, but that is gender-based violence that we're talking about. But what are the solutions? How do we help people that remain after those scenarios? Because surely their lives are devastated, healthcare, and they need to integrate back into society. Okay, so we're focusing on this because there's little evidence on how we can solve these problems, or we can lessen the effects of post-conflict or post-disaster. Yeah. So that was our motivation for actually study that. Let's try and look at some potential solutions, and if indeed we can find something to tell policy. And I stand here to say that at least we found something we think we can build on for Mozambique, but I'll also share what we saw in another AERC, and you can tell us what you think or whether you think it will work here. Okay, so that was our research problem, research question and research problems. We were looking at the impact of financial inclusion on women and youth welfare in fragile states. So for youth, what's their welfare like? We believe that education is the key. To what extent can it improve education of the youth? For the women, we're thinking about asset accumulation, because if women don't have assets, they have nothing. If they are cash constrained, they can liquidate the assets and they get money and look after their families or meet their household needs. They can also use these assets to get access to credit, because credit requires collateral. So we used women's access to or asset accumulation as a welfare measure. Okay. Well, financial inclusion. We looked at two measures: access to credit and ownership of a mobile money account. Because of the digitization policy in the country, remember the National Financial Inclusion Strategy that is still underway in especially Mozambique. Several countries have done that, so there was digitization. So we had to think of or to use mobile money account ownership as a measure of financial inclusion. So if you have mobile money account, how does your asset accumulation change? How does your expenditure on education change, or on healthcare change? In some cases, we also want to check whether you start a business. So what I will show you for Mozambique were the positive results. In terms of credit, there wasn't much. There wasn't much here. So we focused more on mobile money. So we measure women welfare by asset ownership, or that was the AERC consumption for Mozambique. Why consumption? I was very happy to hear a lot of students from the agronomy faculty, because I think agriculture is important in this country. So we see a lot of positive results and own food consumption. And I'd like us to discuss more about that, or to hear more from you about how it works. How does land ownership happen here? Do women have access easily to land to grow their own food? What is the process? Is it fair for them, like favorable, or is it constrained? Because it appears that there are positive results, that when there is access to finance, women will feed more or will consume more from their own food production. That's a good sign. But I would like to hear more from the agronomists that are here or the students that are studying. Okay, so children welfare, we focused on school dropouts. Here I see that's what we did, but for this country, we wanted to see what extent you spend on child's education, okay, and their health. Because a child that is not healthy will also not get education. And if you know, right now, I think the World Bank is looking at human capital index of some sort. And there's a lot of focus on, let us start with the basics. The basics would be the child's health. The child is not healthy, stunted and otherwise, there's no way they're going to get the skills. Yeah, you talk about retarded children. Why are they retarded? There will be many factors. In fragility, the mother is carrying a pregnancy that one, she didn't like, she was raped, gender-based violence, continuous, she's pregnant, so she's continuously stressed. Similarly, she cannot carry a child that is normal after time. Then she gives birth, she doesn't even know how to feed this child. Yeah, she won't even have the medical services or facilities to even have an abortion if she wanted to. So she will give birth to a child that is probably not okay. So you can see it's a cycle. So let's talk about expenditure to health. Okay, let me not go through maybe this hypothesis for students. So we say credit reduces female school dropouts. We found that that was the case for DRSC. Credit increases women's asset accumulation. It didn't happen. As I mentioned, that was a result for DRC. In here, we didn't have it because there was no access to credit. Sorry to the interpreter, sometimes I speak fast. Okay, mobile money bank accounts. We hypothesize that they increase consumption from your own production, from your own farm. We also hypothesize that they increase expenditure on education and healthcare. Why? Because mobile money is some form of payment mechanism. It quickens payments, right? Instead of carrying cash, which can be easily taken from you, you have mobile money. So I can pay from here even without going to the rural areas. I have a family member that is staying there and is sick. I can quickly pay the service provider. They take the person to school for services or to the clinic for healthcare. So we hope that that's what we will see in the results. Of course, we will see what happens. That's what we call Cartoon Network. And no student likes to see that, so I will skip through that, don't worry. But I know some professors often like to ask the questions. So that is just telling us nothing other than what I have said. Okay, that we will check the effect of mobile money, account holding on consumption and on expenditure on health and expenditure on education. And just purely checking mobile money. So I will be looking at two people. One has a mobile money account, two women. One has a mobile money account, the other doesn't have a mobile money account. That's in the one case. In the other case, we want to look at men versus women. If women have a mobile money account and men have a mobile money account, how does their welfare differ? Because you're going to find what we call a female-headed household and a male-headed household. In Africa, we like to argue, men will say, no, there is no such a thing in the African culture as a female-headed household. we have a lot of single mothers. Who's heading those households? These women, even where you are married, you are there, the head is there. But that head that is male is not running the day-to-day businesses. Of course, in that case, we can't say that that is a female-headed household if the person is married. So let's not downplay the issue of female-headed house. In a fragile state, fragile country, this is even very evident, right? Because when the war comes, what did I say? Men are the first to go. Sometimes they don't go voluntarily, they are taken by force. Then I'm left behind and without any hope of ever seeing this father of this child. Remember, you got married at age 12. By whichever age you have, every year you're giving birth because you don't even know what they mean by family planning. And the study that at least was reported when I was still in Oxford, that was conducted here, that men don't even want to hear that word called family planning. In Mozambique, they will beat you if you even talk about it. That's what the study showed. Now, these were women who asked, and even the men were like, we don't talk about that. So, early child, right? No family planning, no knowledge of even how to prevent pregnancies, no skills of how to take care of babies. You can rest assured by age 20 that there are about 8 children already in that house, if God is lenient and all of them leave. But they will be stunted and in whichever form. Now the man is gone. There's a young child who's now 20 years old, maybe, with 8 children. That is a female-headed household. Yeah. So we use the FinScope survey. The data at these FinScope surveys are conducted here or in several African countries, but what they focus on is the financial sector, use of financial services, why you use them, or if you don't use them, why not? Which type of products do you use? And they will ask a couple of questions around your welfare. Where do you work? What is your major source of earning, income? What is your activity like? You know, your level of education, how old you are, the household size, meaning how many people are in that house. Well, fortunately, in this survey, we saw about 4. The number was about 4. We don't get into the gender, whether this is a married household, but the person that is interviewed will be asked whether they're married or not. We're talking about whether they're the household heads and maybe or not. That was Mozambique. I put the DRC study specifically to ask if you have a similar study that is conducted. If anybody knows about your Bureau of Statistics, if they have a survey that has these variables that we're interested in, asset ownership in a household, of course, school dropout, we can pick from UNICEF, yeah, and financial inclusion, because for us to do this, we need either to have these, these indicators in one data set, or we can mix them and match these data sets. But this is a survey that we found in DRC, and I put it here just to ask you if I can be guided on whether you have it. So we can also use it to actually compare, to make better comparison sometime. But for you, we used a FinScope survey. So we were able to know who owns a bank account, who owns a mobile account, when is the last time they ever owned it, who has a microfinance product, who has an insurance product, any product whatsoever that you have. This data set will tell us. So all the results that I'm going to show you now will be coming from this data set. Please write your questions just to remind you so that we can answer them as we go along. So what did we find in that data? you have up to 45% of women, yeah, consuming, okay, let's start with the average. On average, 45% of Mozambican consume from their own firms. So they don't buy food, they consume what they produce, right? Now, when it comes to healthcare and insurance, we have about 38%. Expenditure on education, about 44%. And mobile money accounts, just 22%. So imagine 2019, since 2016, 2014, when they instituted the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, we still are seeing this low money uptake. The colleagues from the financial sector, please do prepare some of the responses as to why we still have this low uptake. Is it a regulatory issue, or is it a low demand issue, or is there something that you are not addressing, that you're probably not meeting the needs of the people? I'll be glad to hear from you on that. Okay. Then we wanted to look at females versus males. Yeah. This is where we go and look at what I told you. Two women, some have mobile money, others don't have mobile money. Okay, what do we find in terms of, again, food consumption, own food consumption? So you will find that about, there's a difference here that's a little bit, you know, not worrisome, should I say. It is significant that women who have mobile money, yeah, consume slightly less food than women who don't have. So when you're looking at your screen, if I move away from here, they won't see me and my pointer wasn't working, but allow me 2 minutes for those that are online to step away, just for the benefit of those in the room. Okay. Did I touch where I'm not supposed to touch? Okay. It's working now? Okay. I need to connect it here. To point there when I go there. Okay, all right. Okay. Oh, all right. So there are two options here. I can either move with the microphone or I can point, but the teacher that I am, I think I have a lot. Where is the pointer? I don't see. Okay, let me just move. For those online, I still think they can hear me. So going back, we have 36% holders of mobile money accounts, 48% non-holders of mobile money account. These are women, yeah, or female-headed households, right? Over there. These are male-headed households. So here you're comparing a man with a mobile money account and a man without a mobile money account. Yeah, just so we can move together. Okay. Oh, it's becoming too hectic now. So let's proceed. Okay, so let's see. That is the one thing that Thank you very much. We have gentlemen. Okay. Okay. Obrigado. Okay. All right, so then we talk about amount spent on healthcare. That's another good concern. Again, I find something weird that female households spend less on health than male-headed households that have mobile money accounts. Then one would start asking a question, does it even help for us to give women mobile money accounts? But I want us to think deeper, that there is something that this data set is not showing me. How was the data generated? They come to a household, they pick one person to represent the house. That person might be the man, he might be a woman, then they'll start asking that person questions. Now, this particular study does not tell us the dynamics in that house. We didn't ask, or at least this study doesn't tell us the powers that that woman have or has. And I was beginning to think that we're having a scenario of DRSC, that although the woman has mobile money, she probably doesn't make a lot of decisions on that mobile money. The other thing we have seen with mobile money, and financial practitioners here can tell us, we will have a mobile money account in the house and it is one, and everybody uses that one. It will be the man, it will be the woman, it will be everybody receives money through that mobile money. Who does it belong to? It could be mine, but everybody else uses it. So if we ask, has this house received mobile money? Yes. And then we'll ask, how much has been spent by this house on education? Will tell us who made that decision is not a question that is asked. Yeah, so we're seeing this in a female-headed household. We see this. So is it a case of women have so many other demands that they won't think about spending on health? Yet studies show us that women tend to think about nutrition. They tend to think about health of their children in the house. So this was a troublesome, scripted statistic, but let us go on and see what the results. I'm moving off. I'm not going to show you DRSC, but for DRSC, I think what we saw was that there was a lot of, sorry, I thought I had removed that slide. That's not here, that's DRSC. So DRSC and here have something in common, both fragile states, limited access to credit, and that was their access to credit. It was mainly informal. But we could see that they were doing something good with that credit. Now, I couldn't get data or couldn't, there was pretty much little. Some majority of the people preferred not to give an answer to that question of credit. They say no, okay, but they didn't tell us anything more. In that study, they didn't say more, so I wasn't able to generate a graph. But that was for DRSC, not for you. So let me quickly now move into the results. So the first thing we saw was, what I've showed earlier is what we see in the data. Now, econometrically, we now go to test that these relationships and these differences, are they significant? So this is what we are seeing here. I put this up because of academicians, because the academicians in DRC were really interested in a lot of questions and the econometrics and all of these estimates. So I figured that I might find more academicians here as well. So I included the tables. So mobile money, we don't see any significance in consumption, on consumption, but this is what we call ordinary least squares. So let me again speak to the students for a while and academicians. Let's remember something, maybe results that I haven't showed. Something called mobile money or financial inclusion. I choose to go for it. It's something called choice. Yeah, that even if they opened a bank next to your house, you might choose not to go there for so many reasons. Even if the country said that everybody gets a free bank account, you can still say, there's something hidden here, I'm not gonna go. So there's an element of choosing. Yeah, I choose to go. So that choice kind of mimics a lot of the results, that rather it blurs the results and can be misleading to the results that we get. So for students, whatever you see OLS results, yeah, these are just basic results without taking into consideration what we would call individual. I know I'm talking to policymakers. For policymakers, there are many characteristics that you can observe. You will ask people how old they are, and you'll ask for their IDs to prove that that is the age they're telling you. You can ask them whether they have an income, and you will ask them for proof. So you'll ask proof of address, proof of income, you married or not, proof of certificate. But there are other characteristics that you do not observe. I'm not sure the extent to which you address such issues. Issues like trust, you may not observe. So researchers too don't observe that. But now we try to conduct our studies in such a way that the results we give you have taken into account those characteristics that you do not see. The moral hazard issues that you do not, that you constantly worry about. How risky a person is, unless if they're coming for credit, where you can see their credit record. Do you have credit records here? Credit bureaus? So you're a cash economy. Okay, credit register, but that's not for the households, eh? Yeah. So you don't get things on credit here. No. So that, how can in a cash economy one tell how risky a person is? So the policymakers, these are some of the issues you have to deal with. Researchers like us will give you results that have taken into account those unobserved characteristics. So where you see OLS, just ignore those results, but I want to show you the students, because I also saw a lot of students at the AERC, do not always go by what you see in OLS results. Yeah? Policymakers always ask, when academicians come to you or consultants, ask them, how about those factors we don't see? How did you deal with them? That's at least the one thing that I would like to tell you. Okay. All right. So let's look at own consumption and mobile money. Yeah. So again, what I see, where you see a little star, you can see the stars. Yeah. Where you see a little star on a figure, it means it is significant. Policymakers like the graphs. Yeah, that is good. And they like statements like, oh, by 23%, if you give them mobile money accounts, you're going to improve their lives by 23%. That too is not, an easy to interpret figure. 23% of what? Of asset accumulation. What does it mean? Yeah. But let's say it is positive and significant. In other words, it makes a lot of improvements on one's welfare. So mobile money accounts held by men. Yeah? I've numbered the columns 1, 2. If you consider only 1 and 2, columns 1 and 2. Mobile money account holders, those are men. They will increase their consumption. You can see that star there. I haven't worried about the women's stuff because, women's figure because it doesn't have a star. You say this can point, but I don't. You see a pointer anywhere? Oh, yeah, there we are. Here. Okay, if you look at that, it doesn't have a star, so I didn't worry about it. If you come here, there's that star there. This is the figure that is significant. So if I have two people, a man and a woman, both have a mobile money account. These are female-headed households and male-headed households. It's only in these male-headed households that I will see an improvement in own food consumption, meaning that these women might be consuming somewhere else. Probably they're buying, but mobile money is not helping them. Now, I see that result, but I don't know why. So mobile money accounts, where are the agents? Because it could easily have something to do with where the agents are placed. You see how policy now fits into the results that we are finding? Because I'm seeing that result and it bothers me. If, for instance, like I saw this in Zambia, if mobile money agents are placed where you have agricultural inputs providers or suppliers of those inputs, it means that it's a combination of two things. Easy access to fertilizers, for instance, for the farmers, and they can have an easy way of paying for that service. So the combination of those two makes mobile money in the agricultural sector, have an impact. Now, if, for the fact that we have men and women here, if women, remember, until recently, it was not prohibited by this government to discriminate between men and women. So discrimination in the financial sector. I'm not talking about anything else. So if women until 2005 could not sign a contract of any form, including a credit contract, even when you bring a policy like mobile money, and it's placed maybe at an agricultural suppliers or agricultural input supply center, women might not go. Maybe, just maybe, again, students and service providers, please do tell me how I can explain this result, because we would like to put context onto it, but this is what we find. That's the first result, that mobile money accounts are working, but for men. But my study was focusing on women. How do I help women improve? Moving on. Let's look at expenditure on healthcare. Yeah? Expenditure on healthcare, that is columns 3 and 4. Yeah? Expenditure on healthcare, columns 3 and 4. Again, I have men, I have women. So what do I find? I find a decline, but it's not significant, so we don't take that, we don't consider it. But look at the increase. So for those that would ask, why do I see 2 stars, 1 star, and 3 stars? Maximum is just 3 stars. This is a higher level of significance, okay? That one over there. Okay, I don't know who did that. Was it me? Yes. Okay, so again, you see more expenditure for healthcare by men who have a mobile money account. When it comes to education, there's nothing. So what do I take away from here? There seems to be reluctance on education. There seems to be reluctance. We're having a lot of school dropouts, but there is not so much. Now I heard there's somebody from what was it? Something related to education, I think, higher education something. What is the policy like in here? Do you have a policy on education like free education or credit towards education, or what's subsidies towards education? Why are we not seeing, what is it that we are missing here? So this is the key takeaway from this study for you, Mozambique, that we see more women in areas that have high penetration, yeah, but we see that men tend to have more access to mobile money account. Yes, everybody needs a cell phone, and it's an electronic gadget. Remember what I said. So it's probably more likely that a man will hold a mobile phone than a woman. What we like to see, what we liked in this study was the fact that, well, they spend more on healthcare. I think we can all applaud that, right? But that's what I see here. So the policy that was put in place here of agency banking seems to be working. I'm just trying to figure out the channel. So men have mobile money accounts, they spend more on education, and we see more of household on food consumption. Who owns these food crop areas? Is it the men or the women? So where are the women here? They seem to be less and less empowered. So I'm a little bit, we're winding up this study. That's why we didn't share it with you, but we wanted to close some of these gaps. So what can you tell us that we have missed out that can help us explain this result? From our side, we would say, can we not see more mobile money access to these women? Some of the barriers to mobile money accounts that we found were levels of education. And if our women are not educated, there are many things that can go wrong, including their right and their like confidence to say anything. Women are not empowered to even say anything out loud if they're not educated. Okay. So even if I stopped here, and I would be happy. Let's see what happened here now. Okay, cool. This is for just to quickly share before I discuss my results. I've skipped out DRSC, but what did we find with DRSC? Because remember, I was worried about school dropouts. In Mozambique, we see expenditure not on education. So overall household welfare improvement seems to be, mobile money accounts seem to be a solution to reducing the fragility, but not yet on women and not yet on the youth. In the DRSC, we noticed that when they give credit, and when that credit is categorized, you have credit for general expenses, credit going towards education specifically, credit going towards business, and credit, I think those are the three categories. You would see more women, female-headed households, getting that credit and reducing girl child school dropout. So there were many girls that would have loved to stay in school, but the war disrupted that, and inclusion, for some reason, helped to reduce that girl child dropout. So I can bring that into this context and say, how is credit provided here? Is the credit categorized into the purpose for which it is being taken? If so, you have one on education, because that for us was important, that even if you have universal primary education or free education at primary and secondary level, it only caters for tuition. Granting credit towards education can supplement the other scholastic material that households cannot afford often. So is that something that can work here as we do share results as we go along? Okay, so that's the one thing that we found. Similarly to you guys, in the DRSC, credit to women did not help them to accumulate assets. Again, it goes back to what's happening in the house. So we need to look at our so-called cultural norms. Isn't it time to actually shake up things? I can say this and okay, I'm hearing the silent answers, but we need to start somewhere. Women are not accumulating. Secondly, there's something we call behavioral finance. Finance is not a once-off thing. The behavior that one grows, one develops, one nurtures. If you've kept women for so long, you denied them access to certain facilities, they don't have education, financial services are not easy to understand. These are numbers. People will say women hate numbers. No. I had somebody from science and technology. Thank you for being here. We want more girls in STEM subjects. When somebody says, oh, you can't do that, ask them whether they've given you the opportunity. Many times we take girls to catering. We don't take them to engineering. And then we say they fear numbers. Did you give them a chance to try? Yeah. So we don't see women accumulating wealth. In DRSC, we measured that wealth, assets by very basic things. A sewing machine is very important in many households. It's an asset. You use it. It's an entrepreneurial tool, and it's a collateral. Person can use that and go borrow money that I won't pay because this is my tool. Yeah. We also looked at things like, does this household have maybe a bicycle? Does it have a hoe? Yeah, in cases where you have agriculture, it's not, I think, mechanized agriculture. You dig, you slash, you have all these manual tools. Those are the things we look at constructing an asset in. Yeah, you have a little radio. You're not talking about FMs on the cell phones, but previously we even used to look at cameras. Does this household have a camera? We even look at what is the nature of your house, the floor, the roof, the walls. Are they brick or not? Is the roof thatched or is it iron sheets? So all of these tell us the nature of household that you have. So for DRC, we noticed that in female-headed households, we didn't see a lot of change, but at least on education, we were happy that girl could stay in school longer and not be married off. In Mozambique, the story is a little bit different. While there seems to be hope on the mobile money, we'd like to see that mobile money working for women and youth. So far, it's actually benefiting the group of people that are often not discriminated against. And so I was happy when I heard people from the financial sector. How can we improve that situation? Okay, so our findings that mobile money accounts increase consumption from on-food production. It also increases health expenditure. All of these are maybe on the male side. Nonetheless, we have some policy entry points that specifically for Mozambique, we would perhaps argue that try to upscale access to mobile money services, which is the last recommendation or entry point. The 2 points that I have here, let's just give them a moment. I again said that where possible, I'll share with you and see whether they will help you or not. Okay, so we are saying that provide, where is this thing? Yeah, provide subsidies to reduce female dropout. This is in a case where credit works. So this is a lesson that if maybe we give credit that is specifically geared towards education, we could see. If that happens, then we would have to conduct another research study and see whether it reduces female dropouts. Then support growth of village savings groups. Okay, village savings groups are important. Why do we talk about this? Remember the graph that I showed you on Mozambique? The bulk of the credit was coming from family and friends. And women tend to go for that kind of arrangement. Women tend to be risk averse, especially in environments that are very fragile and where they are not empowered. You feel protected as a group. So if they're with other group members, then if she gets money, she can quickly hide it away from the husband that, oh no, it's for the group, for the rest of the ladies as well, so you can't take it away from me. So if that works, is it something that we can maybe think about here in Mozambique? Because fragility creates these similitudes that maybe we can learn from another country. Okay, I think I've spoken a lot. That is what I had to present today, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much. Obrigada. Okay. So as Doc Bruno is away, let's, yeah, I'm happy to take more, to start taking the questions or comments because I handed over the floor to you in your absence.
I'm sorry.
I thought I was
Ok. So, antes de mais, vamos dar um aplauso à doutora por ter... Peço que me desculpem por me ter ausentado, estava a atender uma chamada muito urgente. Então, vimos aqui a apresentação sobre os resultados da pesquisa. Chegou a altura de nós fazermos os nossos comentários, pormos as nossas inquietações, caso tenhamos dúvidas, expormos as nossas dúvidas para ela dar o devido esclarecimento. Então, vamos levantar as mãos, quem tiver alguma questão a colocar, algum comentário a fazer. Vamos tomar primeiro as questões. Vamos por ciclo de 5, 5. 5, depois dá-se a resposta, depois outros 5. E peço a quem tiver alguma questão que primeiro se identifique, depois coloque a questão que tiver. Ou quem quiser fazer o comentário, levanta a mão, depois vai se identificar e vai dizer, vai pôr a questão que tiver. E muito obrigado. Está aberta a sessão. Podem falar mesmo em português, que temos a tradução em simultâneo que vai traduzir em inglês para ela.
Boa tarde. Okay, so I could ask a question in English. No, I said I can ask a question in English for us. Sim, boa tarde. Portanto, o meu nome é Amilcar Aguiar. Eu queria primeiro fazer um comentário, depois uma pergunta inicial. Portanto, eu acho que para perceber melhor o contexto moçambicano, talvez fosse bom distinguir o que é a população urbana da rural. O comportamento urbano-rural no que respeita ao acesso financeiro é muito diferente. Provavelmente pesa mais nos dados, depois diferenciar, mas não consegue. A pergunta que faria é, vejo que quando se fala da inclusão financeira, o estudo está focado no mobile money. Por que essa escolha focada no mobile money, quando nós sabemos que há outros, pelo menos o estudo mostra que ainda se não me engano, tem essas questões de várias formas, até informais, mas ainda há muitos recursos mais informais. Parece-me que focar-nos somente no mobile money para limitar as conclusões.
Obrigado. Mais questões?
Bom dia. Aqui é Gilion. Na apresentação da doutora, pude perceber que a maior preocupação é mesmo a participação das mulheres
na questão da inclusão financeira. E foi apontando diferentes fatores aqui que contribuem para a fraca significância na participação dessas mulheres. Então, como acadêmicos, nós entendemos que é necessário que fique claro a questão dos fatores que contribuem para essa fraca participação das mulheres na questão da sua inclusão, nessa questão de inclusão financeira, não é? Assim sendo, nós sabemos que, como africanos, somos muito inteirados na questão da tradição. Os nossos ideais, a nossa maneira de lidar com a questão da educação, com a questão da inovação tecnológica, está relacionado principalmente à questão das nossas tradições. Assim sendo, como acadêmicos, gostaríamos de entender até que ponto esses estudos são levados, abrange a questão da influência da tradição, das nossas culturas e crenças, na significância da participação das mulheres no acesso aos serviços financeiros. Ou seja, se eu sei que as nossas tradições justificam a maneira como as mulheres participam na questão da inclusão financeira, então eu tenho que entender até que ponto essas tradições podem ser um fator influente. Assim sendo, a questão mesmo que eu gostaria de colocar mesmo esta: vamos estudar até que ponto as nossas tradições e crenças podem contribuir para a participação das mulheres para a questão da inclusão financeira, tendo em conta que 80% da nossa população vive nas zonas rurais e é essa mesma população que maioritariamente tem sido enraizada em nossas tradições. Obrigado.
Boa tarde. Respondo pelo nome de Eugênio finalista do curso de Economia.
Não, vejo ver entre passa o não
interessante.
Só ver porque não, clica esse botão. Não? Vai aparecer com a cara.
Embora estamos a refletir mais na mulher, mas existe uma razão tão grande que temos que perceber sobre a inclusão financeira. Quando nós refletimos sobre a inclusão financeira, falamos que é o local onde os indivíduos e as empresas têm acesso a produtos e serviços financeiros. No caso de Moçambique, encontramos várias dificuldades no acesso desses produtos e serviços. Na Zona Sul, é importante referenciar que temos a disponibilidade desses produtos e serviços, mas nas zonas rurais, a maior dificuldade é acesso a esses produtos e serviços. E nas zonas rurais nós encontramos maior índice de homens que estão ligados às empresas e facilmente eles têm facilidade de encontrar esses produtos e serviços, porque as mulheres nas zonas rurais não têm muitas oportunidades comparando com os homens. Existe uma componente muito importante cá no nosso país, que é a falta da própria educação financeira. Então, é importante que o estudo leve estes pontos de modo a ter resultados fiéis daquilo que interessa ao nosso país. Muito obrigado.
Vamos agora pedir à apresentadora para dar alguma resposta às questões colocadas antes de passarmos para a segunda ronda.
Yeah, I have decided to respond to this so long, just to give more time to other people to prepare their questions. I would be really interested in hearing responses to the questions that I raised. Please help us so that we can complete this study and share it with you, policymakers, and with you. So there are some questions that we are also looking for answers to, especially around agriculture, ownership of land, and how it's distributed between maybe households, okay, in order to use it for growing food. And I think I also raised some other questions, if you can remember them. But to answer some of the questions that have been raised so far, so what I didn't show you was the full set of results. Remember what I said, that when a survey is done, many of us have been part of the census, right? We know that when they come and survey you, they will know that you are in a rural area or in an urban area. So when we get the data, we find your location. That location is considered when we are constructing reports. You must have seen in my results, I only focused pretty much on mobile money account, health expenditure, education expenditure, and food consumption. But when you see the full set of results, I will also have included the age of the person who was interviewed and the education level of this person. We'll also have included the income level, whether this person is a farmer or is a salaried worker, and the majority of Mozambican are not salaried workers, they are self-employed and agriculture based. We will also include whether this person is in the rural area or in the urban area. This is a serious concern, yes. That is why that variable is never taken lightly. More so because an asset in the village is not the same as an asset in the town. In the town, I talked about, let's say, rather in the village, or earlier, I talked about assets like a hoe for farming, a sewing machine, well, or a little radio. To find one house in the village that has a little radio, that house will be rich, really rich. Whereas in the city, pretty much everybody might have it, and even a TV. So when we are constructing the asset index, if that is what I had used in your case for Mozambique, we used that for DRC. There is a way these assets are given a weight, yeah, depending on where the person resides. So as an academician, and I say this to policymakers, that by the time we give you these results, we have taken into consideration all of these factors. However, what we did not do, which is another way of doing this, you saw the way I split this up by women, just studying women alone and then men alone. So you saw me saying female-headed households, male-headed households. What we want to do now, because even the DRC asked us, we can now split the sample and say, okay, we're looking at only people residing in the urban areas and people residing in the rural areas, and see whether the results are going to differ from when we have a dummy, because sometimes we just insert a dummy. Rural 1, urban 0. Yeah, so that is the same way for students, you know what I mean, right? So if I showed you the full set of results, you will see a variable called location. And location will equal 1 if this person is maybe in a rural area, and 0 if he is in a town. And then I look at the result that I get. Is it significant? Does that difference matter or not? So There are two ways of doing it. So far, the way we have done it is such a way that even when we take into consideration all of those factors, yeah, this is what we find. So if it doesn't, if it would affect a person who is in the urban area, for instance, where you have connectivity, because you have electricity here almost everywhere, but you still find connectivity, internet in the city, and you find that women are still not getting the cell phone. Do you think it's going to change if I go to the rural area where connectivity is not even available? So I have already incorporated that into the studies, but for the peace of mind of individuals, the sample can be split, and we check whether in the rural areas where there's actually no connectivity for everybody, there's nothing that's going to change. Econometrically, professors here can help me maybe explain it in Portuguese if we're losing it in the translation. If you have fewer people vis-a-vis your treatment, if my treatment is, for instance, financial inclusion, and I define financial inclusion by access to a bank account, and I have 2,000 people interviewed. By the way, 2,000 people will be representing the entire Mozambique, because they will not be coming from one center, they'll be coming from all your provinces, and we will see which province is more affluent, which province is poorer, their weights. The National Bureau of Statistics does that. So if I do that, and I find that only 10 people have a bank account, and the rest don't have a bank account, then I cannot use bank account ownership as, because it's non-existent. Even though it's a product that's offered in the country, but the fact that I have 10 versus 1,990 that do not have, if you put that through a software to run that model, it will not run, because you have zero. It's as good as 0%. You see what I mean? So for that reason, we did not consider your traditional financial products because the numbers were very, very low. You run a probit model, students here, I'm a professor as well. If you run a probit model in econometrics with so many zeros or so many ones, it will not run. We know that, right? Do you have any statisticians here? Prof, can you help me out? Online, there are a few people. That model doesn't run. Why? Because it's very tiny, that what the model does, just to go into what happens in the background, is that you have 10 people vis-a-vis 1,990. So what the model does is to eliminate everybody where the answer is no. No. So it will eliminate all the 1,990. And you remain with 10 people. Now, we have something called statistical power. You cannot run a model with 10 observations. The lowest number of observations that you can run a model with, which is what we call the student t-test, is 20 observations. So the reason why we threw out all the traditional products, answer the question, sir, is that there were no users of these formal products. However, we found a balance between those who had mobile money and those who didn't have. And more importantly, because mobile money accounts have minimal barriers when it comes to the supply side. Even a person in the rural area can get it. If there's a mast somewhere, how many of you go to your villages with your cell phones? At least to some extent, you can get the network. After some point, maybe not. But you can see that up to the last point where you can get the network, can a bank put a branch there? How is the road up to even that place? Where you still get a signal, yeah, your cell phone signal, can a bank put a branch there? How is the road network? How is the electricity supply? In other words, you see that with mobile money, you get more leverage. So we considered it because many more people were using it compared to the other products. So with the rural versus urban, we've already taken that into consideration as one of our variables, but we'll try and split the sample to see if we're going to find a difference. Now, the question of traditional factors, that is why I gave you a little bit of what we found in DRC. I agree with you 100%. Remember, we are talking about fragility, which compounds the problems that we often have in our developing country setting. Our women, and many times women in general, countries post-colonialism, we did not throw away many of the teachings that we got. If I talk about South Africa, where I stay, with apartheid, Blacks were denied access to the formal sector, so they had to find ways of surviving and meeting their financial obligations. And they came up with what we call the Stokvels, if you've heard of them. In other country settings, West Africa, other Southern African countries, East Africa, they talk about ROSCAs, rotating savings and credit schemes. You've heard of SUSU. It's in West Africa, Ghana, something similar. Now, that's something that is embedded in people. It works. We work together as a group of village people. I talked about village savings groups and cooperatives. We are people that are social. So cooperative banks would work well because with cooperatives, you're going as a group. I talked about that. I brought it up specifically for the country settings that we find ourselves in. We tend to work better in groups to mitigate the risks because we're risk averse of what is brought to us as new technology. A bank and even mobile money is new technology. Technology adoption is very slow in many cases. I will stick with what I want, which I have been using. If it works for me, why should I move to something new? So we try to incorporate our cultures, or we acknowledge them. The question should go to some of our colleagues seated here that are in the formal sector. This is something we've been advocating for, to try and bring into the formal financial system products that are catering for groups. So stokvels in South Africa are now being integrated into the formal sector. So you will find banks like the FNB, First National Bank, with a stokvel account. So stokvels sometimes have 1,000 members, 100 members, 5 members. So you come with your stokvel now, and they try and model it some in a similar manner as they would do to an individual. Manifesto, get 2 representatives or 3 that will be the signatories on your account. What would we call this account for you guys? It is coming as a account. So to answer your question, that would be one of the ways. Those are the unobserved factors that we need to start considering if we need to get people interested in the private sector where money is. Let's not forget, funds and capital is in the private sector. So in the private sector also needs to learn how to go to the people that need the money, who are people in rural areas and those that don't have. How do you do that? Try and use their systems. Their systems are such that they work better in groups. That is why microfinance institutions took off. They took off, but of course, they've mismanaged that model. But it's a model that was based on the practices, cultural practices, or traditional practices of society. So while I hear you, there are ways that we can deal with those traditional factors. Supply side constraints. Yes, and that is why I asked that question, that what is it that is preventing women from taking mobile money accounts? We know that there is something called market survey in the private sector. Colleagues from the private sector, could you at least help us answer this question? What has come to your tables as to the reason why you don't see women coming for mobile money accounts? Because this is, one of the supply side constraints that one of the last question was pointing to. We also don't understand why, and that is why I'm here, actually. I would expect more answers than questions to me, because I've also come to get answers from you based on the results that I got. So please, can somebody tell us? Let's just have a discussion. I've forgotten, I didn't write the names, but I wrote the institutions. The gentleman here from the private sector, financial institutions, what are some of the reasons that are given, please, so we can understand? Yes, sir.
Questões foram várias, não tenho necessariamente respostas. Aliás, algumas até foram estudos já com as barreiras de acesso ao mobile. Uma das questões já foi apontada, parece que de fato a educação. Portanto, o nível da escolaridade é muito baixo e para manejar, portanto, nós temos em Moçambique serviços simplificados que usam a tecnologia USSD, na mobile phone, pode aceder a contas bancárias móveis, mas requer também algum conhecimento. Em si já é uma barreira. Mas já há outro fator também, já foi aflorado, que é quem tem nas famílias, quem tem poder na gestão do dinheiro. É um homem, em parte dos casos. Temos algumas exceções em Moçambique, mas muitas vezes é o homem que toma decisões financeiras. Então, isso influencia bastante nos números que nós temos aqui. Mas quando eu falei da questão de outros financeiros, queria falar também dos temas como de rosca, nós temos a ASCA, são sistemas de poupança, de empréstimos rurais, familiares, grupos, em que aí nós vemos muita participação de mulheres. Nesse sistema de poupanças comunitárias, as mulheres são muito ativas, as empresárias e não só, tanto pequenos negócios familiares e não só, são muito ativas aí. Nesses grupos há um líder, pode ser um homem ou uma mulher, nos casos são das mulheres que gerem os líderes, que gerem o grupo, são pessoas com um bocadinho mais de instrução, por vezes em zonas como Nampula, em associações que apoiam esses grupos. O nome de uma delas agora, em que as associações indicam facilitadores que vão até o terreno, vão às localidades apoiar este poupança a se organizar. E aí, em alguns casos, já usam até o mobile money. É o Pavla, para saber que funciona em Nampula, mas há várias organizações que trabalham nisto que ajudam esta poupança comunitária a desenvolver e também a ligarem-se com os bancos ou a usarem os serviços de banca eletrónica, o M-PES, o M-Cash e já esse trabalho já existe, mas de fato a questão da educação é muito importante. E voltando à questão do empowerment, nesse grupo de poupança comunitária, aí a gente já vê as senhoras mais ativas, que, quando entram no negócio, em que elas próprias gerem seu negócio, já se vê o impacto da poupança, do seu crédito na sua vida, no seu negócio. Então, essas são as situações em que a mulher já consegue gerir, mesmo se for casada, mesmo se consegue influenciar no destino que se dá ao dinheiro da família. Já daria os comentários?
Okay. Thank you so much. I think this is very useful. think I see another hand from Professor at the back. Prof?
Boa tarde, acho que já boa tarde para as três. Primeiro, se houver aquela questão que pediram esclarecimento quanto ao número de observações e como poder, e a possibilidade de fazer análises econométricas, se ainda continuar a dúvida, não acompanhei a tradução, eu poderia providenciar informação adicional, se necessário. Mas eu gostaria de dar seguimento à contribuição do último colega, e esse, de facto, tem sido a inquietação que está comigo aqui desde o princípio. O estudo é muito bom, mas é um primeiro passo, e esse estudo não vai, de facto, permitir responder, a minha forma de ver, permitir responder as questões que aqui são mesmo fundamentais. Por que isso? É que o estudo está feito ao nível do agregado familiar, enquanto que para decisões de inclusão financeira, as decisões estão mais ao nível do indivíduo. Como o colega acabou de apresentar aqui, há muitas formas de inclusão financeira, muitas formas de acesso a diferentes formas de crédito, de negócio, que as mulheres participam, que são iniciativas individuais, que jogam um papel extremamente importante nas decisões ao nível do agregado familiar, mas que nesse estudo não é possível capturar esse tipo de informações. Mas dá informação útil. Acho que aqui há necessidade de olharmos para as decisões intra-household, decisões dentro do agregado familiar, em vez de olharmos para decisões inter-household, entre os agregados fundamentais. Porque a maior parte das perguntas, a resposta vai estar exatamente ali naquelas decisões que são tomadas ao nível do indivíduo. Então, para de facto respondermos às questões que foram aqui apresentadas, que são extremamente importantes, há de facto a necessidade de dar-se um passo adicional. Não sei se a AERC ou outras instituições que aqui estão representadas poderiam por recursos financeiros, porque de facto não acho que existam dados que mostram isso, mas eu já vi dados relacionados com acesso à terra, questões de acesso à terra, e perguntas feitas ao nível do indivíduo, e você mostram resultados extremamente diferentes por causa dessas dinâmicas, incluindo os aspectos culturais que aqui foram levantados. Obrigado.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much. I appreciate, for pointing us to the fact that we cannot answer all the questions by this study, and that this is just the beginning. We can build on this, and AERC is here. We can invest the money and we build on more results or more studies. But I would like to take away one point that I think I even forgot. The gentleman had mentioned something to do with financial education, and the colleague here has also raised education. And I remember that I told you one of the key determinants of mobile money account ownership was education. Even us, we noticed that those with up to primary level education, yes, were likely to have a mobile money account, but the probability increased if they had secondary school education. Now, you see why we were focusing on education to start with. Without education, you have nothing. Now, we would like to understand, I think that is the one thing that we didn't get enough information about. What is the policy of education in this country to start with? Because even when we give access to finances, you find that education was non-responsive. You remember the last two columns. 5 and 6, that was education expenditure. Nobody even bothers. So is there no hope in the country that no one even bothers about focusing on education and making sure that people should be educated here? When I finish with my response here, I'm hoping that somebody can help us to answer the question of UPE. Do you have universal primary education here? I don't know. Help me to answer that. Without education, then you're left with interventions at every level, especially when it comes to financial matters. So there's something called financial literacy. When I did my PhD, I focused about 2 chapters of my work on financial literacy. You don't need to do sophisticated work. Sometimes you just need to address the basics of society, because I believe in policy change and research that impacts policy. We discovered that in South Africa, people were given credit. When the financial crisis hit, I was the CEO of an institution called the South African Savings Institute. It was very disturbing to speak to the consumer tribunal every day and having people thinking that, no, I didn't know that I was supposed to pay back. So what happened was that there was a policy of financial inclusion in 2003 in South Africa. They then later instituted something called the Mzansi account. That account was supposed to be zero fee account, because many of us are charged bank fees when we open an account. That account didn't have any fees. They wanted the lower market to get that account. Once you have that account, you have a green barcoded ID booklet. There was also a policy related to access to credit for those who need it. Part of the credit went to accessing things like your lounge set, your chairs that you're going to sit on in your lounge, hi-fi system, screen TV, all of those, washing machine. People wanted to have a luxurious life. So you would get some of that on credit, including clothing, including food. There are some stores that will give you food on credit. Now, how likely are you to pay for food that you already passed, several days ago? You're likely to default. That is fine. But there are things like your chairs, cars, and all of these that you get on credit that can be repossessed. So during the financial crisis, there were loads of repossessions of houses, mortgages that were never paid, cars, furniture, and all of that. And people were claiming ignorance. They say, no, I thought that the government was giving to us that which had been taken from us by the apartheid regime. So when they told somebody that you have a credit limit of, say, $6,000, that would be equivalent to maybe 6,000 rands is about $400. A person would assume that I can go and get goods worth that much. But the obligation to pay back did not crop up at all. So this person was defaulting and defaulting. And because it was a government policy, even the service providers were lenient. They kept on, please, debt collection, until the financial crisis. That is when I decided, no, I need to do my PhD. How can it be that people don't understand? Well, to my PhD, I started a campaign globally. I started to teach children to save, together with the Banking Association of South Africa, and we just went to schools just to teach the difference between needs and wants. Then we went further to universities, because in universities, you find service providers. They're also to blame. They see a doctor graduating, an engineer graduating, a lawyer graduating, and they know these guys are going to make money. They immediately start giving them cars on credit. Kids being kids, like, yes, of course, bring it on. They take them. So we're teaching them to be careful. Others have student loans, but they go on and misuse monies, and they end up not being educated. At that time, the money was given to the students, and instead of paying the fees, they would use it for just consumption, end up not paying fees and being chased out. But this is a loan that they have to pay. No education, no skills, but with it. You know, with that campaign, I guarantee you, we now have something called NASFAS, which is a students, again, education subsidy of some sort. Now the money doesn't go to the student anymore, it goes straight to the institution. You can see how a study can make, you know, a small difference or seemingly small difference, but it makes rather a small initiative, but it makes us a big difference in the outcomes. So now you have students just, you know, maybe they fail, but at least they are not misusing the money. Have to go to school because the money has been paid. Yeah. So you start somewhere. So when I went to do my PhD, I was like, no, I think there's lack of financial literacy here. 100%. And so we measured financial literacy, and indeed, it wasn't only the lower person, even some elites didn't understand the basics of compounding interest rates, that if I borrow money and I don't pay, I miss out. You know, I'm going to pay a lot in terms of interest payable vis-a-vis interest and on my savings, the compounding part of it. So financial literacy is an intervention that can be given to anybody. Now, we have all seen that this country has a very low level of education, which impacts skills, and it's going to impact even interventions like financial inclusion in the country. So policymakers that are here, when you are in a policy like financial inclusion, are you not jumping something? Have you done your feasibility study that people will include it? They might not be included because they don't know. I tell you, you put food there, but people won't eat it. And then you start complaining. Did you teach them how to eat that food? Use chopsticks, for instance. If it's use knives and forks, can you blame somebody for either not eating the food if there are lots of gadgets there? And like, you know what, that's not for me. I don't understand it. So some countries like Malawi, of course, South Africa has also started, Zambia, there are several countries that have put in place a national financial education, financial literacy initiative and policy alongside financial inclusion. That needs to be thought of because education seems to be, you know, curtailing so much progress. So maybe that's what we can, talking to you here, that's maybe one thing that I can also add into my study, but I didn't have a variable to that effect. I can only say if I proxy it with education, I can say, okay, with low levels of education, maybe we use keeping back. I'll give you an example of Philippines. Philippines, there was a study. They were looking at, you talked about rotating, you know, savings groups. Women love them. That is what I was talking about. Try and go to the village and see the models they're using and bring them and integrate them into the formal system. In the Philippines, there was a study, what we call a randomized control experiment. They wanted to engage women into the savings, formal savings or formal financial system. The study is called, I don't know how many economists are here and whether it will be useful for you, but it was by Dean Cullen and Ashraf Nava and some gentleman called Yen. Now, I like it so much. Why? Because they too came across an accidental result. This is a case of a country where when a lady is married, traditionally in that country, the women take care of the finances of the home. Yes, exciting, hey? But think about women who were married when they were young. Remember that 12-year-old you have married off? She didn't even finish, for God's sake, primary school. That most, maybe she's gotten your basic algebra of P4, grade 4. Don't know what level you call it here. So that's the girl that is now married. And the husband, because it's culture, you know, culture is very powerful. The man will go and work and bring the money and give it to her. Well, you're the one who takes care of the home. And we are supposed to, you're supposed to look after everything. Now, don't think about that setting in a way that you have you and your husband. No, this is a setting where you have your in-laws as well. Yeah. So we're talking about serious. Now, when these researchers went to this country to conduct that study, they were saying we wanted to see how, what forces people to save. It was so much about savings behavior, why people would save, why they wouldn't save, at what point they would save. So we talk about risk aversion, we talk about discounting factor. Am I a person who wants to keep now, or am I a person who wants to keep the money now and use it later? Yeah, that is patient. So they were studying something like that. To their surprise, only women were showing up. And they were wondering why no single man, not a single one ever came to lessons or experiments. Even when the men were doing nothing, they didn't show up. Why didn't they show up? Can anybody tell me why they didn't show up? Because matters of finances are for the women. So what am I doing there as a man in that country? So to these guys, they kept on, they went on and asked and asked and asked. No, they didn't even ask. They were just pondering until they were forced to ask. Why are your men not participating? And they were told. Now, just remember the child you're marrying off. Child has no education. Child has to look after a home now with children. She can barely look after herself. How can we even have progress, honestly? She's going to give birth to stunted kids. She won't even understand the value of education. Are we not breeding our own wars on this continent? Because redundancy and being idle will push somebody into the wrong spectrum. Very unemployed children will want to join rebel groups. They want some activity, some action. So if we're constantly just getting these youngsters because, oh, they like to get married. That's what I was told in DRC. And I was not very happy. Oh, if you ask them, they want to get married, really? Or you are forcing them to get, or they don't have role models. Are we not giving back to the rebels ourselves? Because we're not employing them. So my answer or my suggestion to policymakers here, we're going to start instituting some initiatives or implementing initiatives along the way. We have seen that these low levels of education. What are some of the initiatives of financial literacy or financial education? Banks prefer to call it consumer education. Do banks here have consumer education, and at what point? I'm very happy to come and help you, implement a Teach Children Safe campaign or financial literacy campaign in your school systems and university systems, because these are the mothers of tomorrow. These are the fathers of tomorrow who didn't have enough education, and so whatever products you put on the market, they're going to use them. So that is what I mean by intervention, stepwise intervention. At any level, it can learn difference between needs and wants, and basic calculations, basic algebra. We can start from there. So I wanted to talk about that financial literacy. And of course, data would be a good thing to start with. Yes, the question for me was initiatives on financial education, financial literacy, quality of education. Now that remains to the government, and it's not only case of Mozambique. That's a step above us, but the practitioners here, your own interventions, I think we need to see those ones. You can partner with us. I'm also the director for the African Center for Development Finance, where we intervene into practice and policy, and so we can help you and help the country to develop financial education strategy for the country. Yeah, so that will at least complement some of the initiatives that are being put in place on financial inclusion. Finally, savings groups, yes, I see they're working. I have labored that point so much that those informalities need to be, informal models have to be incorporated into the formal in one way or the other. And yeah, data. Prof, we will need to get some more data to see if we can indeed address some of the questions. But at least just a final one, can I hear something about agriculture? Who owns the land that is used by families, and who tills the land? This is just basic between you and your family. If you think of your mother or your grandmother or your grandparents, how is that dynamic like? Because, or can somebody at least point me to some literature, not policy document that I can look at? Many of you are saying you're from agronomy, faculty of agriculture. This must have been your basic policy or background study. Please, can you help me? Because at least we need to say something there. Ladies, there were many of you from agric faculty. There were several students. How is agriculture here? Is agriculture owned by the government, that it is leased, or how is it used? Do we have agricultural financing here? I haven't heard anything to that effect. And yeah, finally, do we have universal primary education, universal secondary education? Those three questions. Can somebody help me, please?
Boa tarde, obrigado. Na verdade, algumas questões já são extemporâneas, mas não devo deixar de dizer. Chamo-me Francisco Mabunda e represento o IPEM e saudar a apresentação, saudar o estudo, saudar a Faculdade de Agronomia pelo esforço e pelo trabalho feito. No entanto, dizia que algumas questões foram já ultrapassadas, que era a questão da localização, o espaço temporal do próprio estudo, na medida em que foi falando, fui percebendo de que momento foi realizado o estudo. Se calhar aqui gostava de recomendar ao estudo que fizesse um cruzamento com alguns estudos, alguma informação que nós temos ao nível de Moçambique sobre a estratégia da inclusão financeira. Esta informação pode ser encontrada na Estratégia Nacional da Inclusão Financeira, que é feita pelo Banco de Moçambique. Acredito que está neste momento no seu último ano. Muita outra informação podemos lá encontrar. Sobre a questão que colocou e falava o que é que as mulheres não aderiam às contas móveis. Eu teria pedido a palavra nessa altura, que era para responder essa questão. Também a resposta não é diferente do que foi colocado. No entanto, na medida em que foi falando, colocou alguma proposta, algumas iniciativas, que era do alinhamento entre as estratégias de educação financeira e a educação. no sentido de mostrarmos que o quão é importante que as pessoas sejam formadas para poderem se beneficiarem ou podermos tirar o grande proveito deste lado. Ora, temos aqui uma parte que é da formação educacional como tal, mas também temos aquela parte de pessoas não formadas, que é preciso ver, alinhar este cenário. Não só nós vamos terminar na questão de formar desde o pequeno, estou a falar do ensino primário até o superior, mas também temos uma outra faixa da população que não está formada. E esta população também faz parte daqueles que utilizam e devem utilizar e devem estar dentro daquilo que é o pacote de estratégia da inclusão financeira. No entanto, é importante que haja um alinhamento, sim, ao nível da política da educação, que isso exista. O Ministério da Educação ou tem um grande papel, desenvolve pacotes, iniciativas de alfabetização, que esta inclusão financeira, esta educação também seja incluída ou inclusa nesses pacotes. Essa era a intervenção que eu tinha sobre este ponto que foi colocado. Obrigado.
Bom, mais uma vez para a palavra. Quanto a algumas questões sobre a terra, acho que aqui especialistas sobre o tema, mas talvez apontar-se um aspecto em relação à cuidado da terra em Moçambique. Portanto, nossa política, nossa legislação moçambicana, a terra não pode ser usada como colateral de crédito. A terra pertence ao Estado, nós somos apenas utilizadores da terra. Até o momento não se pode usar como colateral. Sempre há países em que sim, aqui não. Também quero dar uma nota acerca de educação, acesso universal à educação. Portanto, em Moçambique, de facto, sim, há acesso universal à educação grátis, penso que até na 10ª classe. E julgo que o nosso governo já se apercebeu dos problemas que foram aqui apontados, da desistência escolar das mulheres. Portanto, tem havido campanhas a nível nacional para os pais a manter as crianças na escola, sobretudo as mulheres. Sabe-se que há algumas razões que levam à desistência escolar é para trabalhar nas chamas, na produção. Outros casos é a distância entre a escola e a zona de residência, portanto, as longas, portanto, levam as crianças das escolas, todas as meninas. Casamentos prematuros, também é uma coisa que já foi identificada, vai ter grande impacto. E também a fome. Portanto, como disse, a criança que não tem comida não vai à escola, ou se vai, não tem rendimento. E até iniciativas de ONGs, outras instituições nacionais, para promover mesmo o acesso ao lanche escolar, à comida na própria escola, para as crianças ficarem na escola e terem melhor rendimento. Portanto, são temas que já estão identificados. O último ponto, sobre a literacia financeira. Queria só dar nota que, em termos de legislação, o Banco de Moçambique já, eu diria, impôs aos bancos, às instituições financeiras que tenham iniciativas de inclusão financeira, de educação financeira. Mas penso que, como as instituições financeiras privadas estão focadas no negócio, torna-se muito limitado. De fato, há necessidade de que haja iniciativas mais abrangentes, que começam na escola primária, para educar as crianças. Os bancos vão fazer, mas o impacto será limitado, porque elas estão focadas no seu negócio, no seu segmento. Portanto, acho que aqui há uma...
Boa tarde mais uma vez. Eu gostaria de fazer alguns comentários sobre a questão de terra. Não sou especialista de terra, mas nos últimos anos é um assunto que me tem interessado e tenho feito alguma pesquisa nesta área. E talvez possa indicar alguma literatura posterior sobre este assunto. Mas gostaria de fazer alguns comentários agora. Primeiro, em relação à questão de que a terra pertence ao Estado, é verdade, isso é o que está na lei de terra, está na nossa Constituição, mas é importante nós reconhecermos que, apesar da terra pertencer ao Estado, ninguém pode vender, existe mercado de terra em Moçambique. E isso é como todos perguntar aqui nessa sala que ninguém adquiriu terra aqui sem comprar, apesar de estar na Constituição que não se vende. Então, é uma dimensão que é extremamente importante quando estamos a falar da questão de terra. E depois temos também mas a revisão, por acaso, existe a proposta de revisão da lei de terra, que está em curso, que está a tentar dar algumas diretrizes nessa ordem em termos de mercado de terra. E também a outra questão que é importante e que tem alguma relação com esse estudo tem a ver com o acesso à terra e segurança da terra em sistemas patrilineares e sistemas matrilineares. Nós temos os dois sistemas em Moçambique e as dinâmicas tanto de acesso à terra assim como de segurança da terra nesses dois sistemas são extremamente diferentes e é também um aspecto que deve ser tomado em consideração. Obrigado.
Temos mais alguma intervenção ou podemos fechar? Parece que não há mais nenhuma. Então, vou passar a palavra aqui à doutora Nanzi.
Well, it was really a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you very, very, very much for the words, for listening and for giving us your audience. We would also like to appreciate the contribution that has been made here. I'll ask you the final question there. Why was there a focus on microinsurance? I think that was another question that I had. Amongst the products that were put on the market, or rather part of the policy, there was microinsurance, and we didn't understand why that was the focus. I am not sure, but you can talk to me privately, because that is lingering. And I've heard you mentioning it, or I've heard Professor say something around microinsurance. Otherwise, we really appreciate. It's very saddening that there is a free education and we still see very low skills levels in the country. But I also appreciate the fact that schools are far from homes. Policymakers, I think this is where we need to pull up our socks. Yeah, I was with the World Bank at some point, and it is very saddening when you're seated at that level and looking at Africa as a continent. You see a lot of gaps in many places. When you're talking about the sustainable development goals, we want to see an end to poverty, and finance is one of the tools before we even go to many other desirables, good healthcare outcomes. We want to see good education outcomes. I don't even want to go to so many things like climate, environment, good governance. And it's a saddening story. And as researchers, what we will continue to do is to look for the very small steps that we can take to try and see that we improve our lives. Researchers will help policymakers to improve the lives of their people. So I thank you that you've given us this opportunity to listen to the results that we found and throwing some light on some of the results that we have found. We promise that we will do more because we have institutions like the AERC and several other think tanks that are willing to put money into research. No one is going to help Africa. No one is going to help us deal with our problems. Nobody should deceive you that they know your country better. When you hear calls to rise up and put in proposals, please use them. Use those opportunities. Write to the AERC, join hands with Professor over there. I beg you, I am begging you. I have been seated at so many desks with, the British Academy. I'm a British scholar, British Academy scholar. I have been at the World Bank. I have engaged with many of these institutions, development partners, as they call them. It is very saddening to see that we are not there to do our research on ourselves. I listened to a research in Oxford done on Mozambique, but not by Mozambicans. How can somebody come and tell me about my country, where I grew up, where I know the dynamics more than me? Please, let's rise up and work on our countries. We struggled to study. We struggled. We kept sending emails here and there to seemingly serious institutions. Of course, by then we didn't know proof. Maybe things would have been better. But it is sad that we are not keen. That's the word that I should use. Where countries are keen to learn about or to share, disseminate information about your country through academia and research findings. You need to do it yourselves. Do it proactively. The AERC is one of those centers and institutions, because I have, through them, over the years I've worked on South Africa, I've worked on Uganda, I've worked on Zambia, now DRC, Mozambique. Of course, that's just with them. Yeah, on households and small business, SMEs. With my other network, when I work on other countries, this is not my country, but I'm interested in seeing the welfare of Africa improving. If you're not okay, you're going to be a problem to the neighbor. If the neighbor is not okay, it's going to be a problem to you. So let's rise up. That's my call to you. Let's rise up and solve our own problems. And nothing, at least the fastest platform is through academia. Then we can help our own policymakers and practitioners. That would be my call. Over and above thanking you for the contribution that we have made. I know we've run out of time, but hey, what are we going to do? We're just going to eat. Haven't we eaten enough? I think we need to spend more time thinking and working, like what I see when I go overseas. I lived there and we eat with the trains, that's your life. It's a sandwich and you go in, my tea break, I use it to talk to colleagues. What about this? What about that? Then you're making the coffee. It's just 5 minutes. You always have a 30-minute, moment with the rest of the faculty in Oxford every Monday. That's it. Then I lock myself up and work. But here we eat and we cross our legs. We eat for 2 hours and then we claim we are poor and somebody's going to come do our research. And whose favor? To your favor or their favor? I'm making this plea because it is sad what I see in countries that I visit. I have been visiting several countries on the continent, and we're sitting back a lot. So I have shared with you what I have. We're going to improve the study. Once we're done with it, the AERC will share the results through the contacts that we have through Professor Bruno here and other connections and stuff over there. But we're looking forward between me and Mark, we're looking forward to seeing more proposals coming from here. So pick up anything that I've talked about and prepare a proposal. Like you want to check this depth, yeah, and they will help. There's an agricultural economics angle as well, the thematic researches that he was talking about, you will feed. And the moment they see Maputo, there is no way, or Mozambique, there's no way they're going to throw your proposal out because they build you. We will build you, we will work with you. So thank you very much. I look forward to coming back to Mozambique. I want to go to the beach now, if you don't mind. Obrigado.
Bom, eu proponho que demos mais uma salva de palmas, mas bem forte, à doutora Nanziri, por em tão poucas palavras, em tão curto espaço de tempo, ter posto de novo a descoberto, através desta sua pesquisa, de desafios que a inclusão financeira tem no nosso país. Muitos deles, alguns deles já nos tínhamos apercebido, mas não de forma tão sistematizada, sem as evidências que este estudo veio trazer. Então, para a doutora Nanziri, mais uma salva de palmas. Ok, de forma muito resumida, eu vou dizer os principais pontos que este estudo nos expôs. Primeiro, existem ações que estão sendo desenvolvidas em algumas partes do país e que estão a melhorar a inclusão financeira das mulheres. O segundo ponto é que existem serviços disponíveis, mas a educação financeira é ainda uma barreira, e esta barreira está também associada a aspectos culturais que o nosso povo enfrenta. É preciso ter em conta a inclusão das mulheres no acesso ao crédito e no acesso às contas bancárias, o que pode ser devido à limitada educação por parte delas. Além disso, a fraca literacia financeira determina o não acesso e o fraco uso ou deficiência no uso das tecnologias relacionadas ao mobile money, tanto ao dinheiro móvel. A inclusão da educação financeira nas escolas, sem excluir o grupo de alfabetização, tanto é também uma recomendação feita, no nosso caso, tanto é necessário desenhar estratégias mais inclusivas, que incluam não só a educação formal, como também a alfabetização financeira. Por último, é necessário combinar a informação que este estudo nos trouxe com outra informação adicional que podemos encontrar na Estratégia Nacional de Inclusão Financeira, que está sendo desenhada pelo Banco de Moçambique. Tanto harmonizando esta informação que este estudo nos trouxe com esta que está nesta estratégia, nós podemos ter melhor ideia da situação da inclusão financeira no nosso país e dos esforços que estão sendo feitos a nível do nosso país para melhorar esta inclusão financeira, inclusive também das mulheres e nas áreas rurais. Creio que estes foram os principais pontos que este estudo nos trouxe. Não sei se me fugiu algum. Bom, vou partir do princípio de que o silêncio significa concordância. Então, sendo assim, iria pedir ao Dr. Zavala, não sei se tem mais alguma palavra a dizer, na qualidade de representante da Faculdade de Agronomia no Consórcio Africano para a Pesquisa Econômica. Não tem? Diga. Não. O Dr. Marque ausentou-se. Então, sendo assim, uma vez que o senhor diretor da faculdade, que deveria ser a pessoa a encerrar este evento, não está, vou tomar a liberdade de, em nome dele, mais uma vez agradecer a presença de todos vocês e a ativa participação que houve neste evento, as valiosas contribuições dadas e esperar que estas contribuições sejam tomadas em conta no relatório final e vou desejar a todos um bom regresso aos vossos pontos de origem. E antes de regressarmos aos nossos pontos de origem, vamos refrescar as nossas forças com um almoço antecedido de uma foto de família no jardim que está lá fora. E a todos, mais uma vez, meu muito obrigado. Declaro encerrado este seminário. E boa viagem para os vossos pontos de origem.